Here we go. Awesome. So welcome all y'all to the Bliss Talks. I am Krista Hammerbacher-Hoppola. I invite you to just call me Krista. I'm a consciousness design guide and author, and the Bliss Talks are my way of taking what happens in my office out from behind closed doors to bring themes that come up throughout my work with clients one-on-one, one-on-two, in circles that are synchronous and at retreats, and be able to spend some time with you today on this East Coast afternoon at 3 o'clock, and hopefully accommodate those of you who are across the country and across the oceans for our Aussie and our European folks. I'm so grateful for when you can join. And so that is the time frame that I like to plan the Bliss Talks to happen. So the Bliss Talks are, again, here for me to bring themes from behind closed doors out into the world to raise consciousness. And for you to have this recording, if you're listening back later in that timey-wimey time machine, and in that you get to listen back, you get to have whatever connection you want to this information. You can listen to it again, you can share it with folks. I welcome that, please do. Always wanting a little more bliss in our lives. That is my invitation to each and every one of you. The reason it's called Bliss Talks is obviously I'm here talking about bliss, and also I invite you to recognize that bliss is information, that pleasure is our path. And when we are able to be in a space from a consciousness design perspective, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about, when we are able to be in a space of self-sourcedness, of being in that still space to contemplate our wholeness, our physical, our emotional, our cognitive, and our energetic, and we're able to be in that place of contemplation of consciousness, bliss and pleasure serve as that roadmap, as that blueprint to precisely what we want more of, which is our wholehearted yes energy. And so I'd love to tell you a little bit more about pleasure illuminated consciousness design. And this is a part of my practice. I have been doing this since 2005. I love my work. The word doesn't actually resonate when I say it out of my mouth. It's like, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like truly my sacred service. And I just have a fantastic time being here with all of you. And I, in light of the theme today, learn just as much from these times together as I hope that you do as well. This information about pleasure illuminated consciousness design, our theme today being enlightenment through connection, is really available for you to make yours. So how my consciousness design works, what pleasure illuminates for me, is going to be different for you and how you apply it in your life. There's no right and wrong, good or bad here. There's only useful and not useful. And that brings you into that space of intuitive knowing, of that recognition that more than our cognitive brain has answers, has wisdom for us. So we learn to listen a little bit deeper into our consciousness when we recognize that we don't have to think our way through every single question. We get to feel into it. And we get to listen to that heart wisdom. We get to bring in the energy of our bodies, which we're going to talk about today in the theme today, enlightenment through connection. And emotional, physical, energetic, we get to listen to that source of information that we can't quite put our finger on, but we know it tends to lead us in the direction of greater alignment and flow. And lastly, we're not going to throw the brain out the window. Cognition is important. We do live in a culture that tends to overprivilege the cognitive, in that we then leave a lot of wisdom on the table that from our bodies, from our emotion, from our energy. And so this is an invitation in pleasure illuminated consciousness design to tap into and be intimate with all of those sources of wisdom. So I'm scooping myself a little bit here as I start to talk about consciousness design. A few of the facets, the primary facets that I like to offer to get started. So those of you who are new to consciousness design, which by the way, you might be new to consciousness design because I just made it up from my perspective. This is my approach that I feel is the eclectic drawing from all of the different modalities and perspectives that I've been privileged to sit with teachers over the decades now. And I've synthesized it through what I find works best in alignment and flow. By best, I mean most useful for my clients. So one of the facets is that recognition that our human experience includes a lot of different experiences, those 4 dimensions of the human experience: cognitive, emotional, physical, and energetic. Energetic being the one that many of us are least familiar with or may have least intimacy with in our own understanding of self. And that then begets another facet of consciousness design, which is energy first. So the invitation to notice that wisdom that seems to be sourced from wherever you might name it, whether that's spirit, God, subconscious, heart wisdom. It's lots of different things to lots of different people. And what I offer from the consciousness design perspective is you get to own it for yourself. You get to use your own language. And sometimes that can be a little bit tricky when we're moving through these concepts. So I invite you to notice what language doesn't align for you and decide what feels most aligned for you, because oftentimes the foundation of what we're talking about is this energetic noticing of there's a part of my human experience that I can't quite name, whether it's intuition, subconscious, God, goddess, source, spirit, but it's present for me. And what I offer is even the word enlightenment can bring to mind this concept of a path for only spiritual seekers. And what I offer is if you're here just to lighten your load a bit, just to align and flow a little bit more with your life, you're in the right place. And how you name that for yourself is more important than how I name it. You are the expert in your life. You are the genius of your life in that way. So we've talked a bit about the wholeness of the human experience as a facet of consciousness design. Another facet is energy first, this idea of tapping into what am I noticing? What am I feeling? And let that be real for you. And then dig deeper into what's deeper in that wisdom. And then connect that, entwine that with what your heart is saying, what your body is saying, and what, of course, your brain, your cognition is saying. And weave it into this awesome tapestry of wisdom that you can apply in your life. So another primary facet of consciousness design is what we're going to be talking about today, which is what I call mirrors and messengers, or the idea that we can move into a space of understanding self through connection. And when I say understanding self or greater intimacy with self, what I offer is fundamental to this consciousness design journey, is being in that space of understanding self, not just from what you think, but from what you feel in your body, and what you know from that intuitive wisdom that tends to be present for all of us, despite that we may have differing levels, again, of intimacy with our energy. So mirrors and messengers is the idea of enlightenment, or lightening our load through connection. And that's what we're here to chat about today. I love, I have a habit of calling Carl Sagan grandpa, but Carl Sagan tells us the cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff, and we are a way for the universe to know itself. And so what I love about that is when I talk about energy first and consciousness design, is that's what we are as human beings, only energy. We're a unique kind of energy, perhaps, and how you conceive of that for yourself is part of the journey. But recognizing, wow, that is true. We are part of this wholeness of the multiverse. And so recognizing the mirrors and messengers, not just the humans that we're connected to, but the energies of the creatures around us, of even the earth itself, we can have connections. But we're going to talk about humans today, as much as I'd love to talk about the fur babies and the birds and all of that, because they have a lot of wisdom for us as well. The connection just feels a little different. So, as we are faces of the universe to know ourselves, then certainly every single one of you is one of those mirrors and messengers for me, just as I am a mirror and messenger for you. And what I offer about that is recognizing that every connection can have wisdom in it. Now, does that mean every single connection is going to blow your mind, or every single connection is going to bring you the answer to that ultimate question? No. However, there is something to learn, something to notice, something to sink into for yourself in every interaction, especially the interactions that create some friction or dissonance, or those interactions that create a deep magnetism. So recognizing that for a lot of us, our connections can range from the incidental out in the world at the grocery store. I don't know why I always pick the grocery store, but it's always the grocery store, to, the momentous connections, a lot of alliteration today, momentous magnetic connections of deep life partnership, or just the deepest core connected friendships and loved ones. And those we can tend to be able to go deeper. And we tend to think about those connections in a way of, oh, yeah, I've got stuff to notice. I've got stuff to handle. I've got stuff to understand about myself in this interaction. And so my invitation to every one of you is to just notice that mirrors and messengers paradigm, and not to make it a must, but to play with it. That's another facet of consciousness design, is that concept of playfulness in the design, of what feels aligned in that playful, pleasureful energy. So this isn't meant to be a hardcore assignment. This is meant to be something that you just play with in your life. So noticing that paradigm of mirrors and messengers, and recognizing also that when we're talking about mirrors and messengers, we are that for others, others are that for us, and there are parts within us, aspects of self, that might also be mirrors and messengers within. We're not going to go there too much today because we're talking about interpersonal and transpersonal connection, but that is a really fun place to play as well. Because if you've ever said to yourself, oh, part of me wants to go out tonight, and part of me just wants to sit on the couch with my lap blanket on, and yeah, there we are. We are multitudes. That's Uncle Walt. Apparently, they're all my family. I don't know. We got Grandpa Sagan and Uncle Walt and all these folks. So, with that being said, my invitation to you then is to notice that when we are in that space of being mirrors and messengers for one another, there is an invitation in that to deep listening or conscious connection, in that we're not just breezing by one another. You may have seen, one of from Unlearn Moderation, one of the concepts that I share is we're being sold interaction as connection, and it's just not the same. So you might do a lot of interacting, but connection is different. And it's not good or bad, right or wrong. Again, we want to stay out of that binary, but coming into that space of, you may have interactions that just sort of glance off you. Even those can be useful to you, but our invitation today is into recognizing that connection is really then the alchemy of two different people, face to face, being mirrors and messengers for one another. And in that connection, there can be deeper wisdom. With that said, we're really talking then about how we take in that wisdom, what we notice about those connections, we can only apply to ourselves. And this can be a challenging one because recognizing we can only control our own choices and our own behavior can really feel like, well, if I wanted to harness this mirrors and messengers so I could, engineer these connections around me, what I offer is to turn that light inward first and notice, where can I get closer to source in self? Where can I get deeper into intimacy with self and show up in a way that is more congruent with the person that I want to be as I'm mirroring back or messengering this information to the folks I'm connecting with? So think about it from that context. Think about it from, what can I learn in these connections? Not in an extractive way, but just in a deep listening, deep noticing, conscious connection way of, how did I feel when I was with that person? How did my body move? Did I want to lean in or did I want to lean out? Was this person making eye contact? How did that make me feel? So recognizing that we get to be the experiment, another facet of consciousness design, be the experiment in these connections when we are in connection and not just in interaction. And so one way to do that is to slow down in those connections and to bring that best capital S centered self, as Carl Jung called it, the capital S self, which is the wholeness of self that's bringing your highest consciousness, your vibration closest to love in every interaction. And then to see what flows back to you and recognize that that's going to be that other person's choice, what flows back to you, and you don't have control over it. And you also can choose to not react to it. You can choose to slow into a response from that capital S centered self, that highest level of consciousness in your consciousness design that you can access right now. And what I offer is, we've got consciousness all over the place happening simultaneously, from the most challenging emotions of shame or humiliation or anger to bliss and to empowerment energy. And so all of that is always existing in us. And when we tend to be under-resourced, or when we're under-resourced, we tend to not have our essence under our what's the word I want, our most aligned power. So recognizing that there are parts of self that can come out where you're like, why is that part speaking for me? Why is that aspect all of a sudden in front? Think road rage, think someone who cuts the line. What happens to your inner world when that kind of interaction or connection, because there's a very clear energetic connection there, what happens to you? Let's leave that person to their choices. What happens in your inner world? And that is your opportunity right there, is not to change that other person's behavior, but to shape your connection to self, your highest consciousness self, in response rather than reaction. So one strategy I'd like to offer all of you is the strategy of the objective observer. This idea of the witnessing of self. I tend to gesture like this, like, I don't know, I look down for myself like a shower head, I guess, I don't know. But I'm up here and I see myself and I'm like, oh, she's not had enough coffee today. She's gonna be feisty right now. Like, she needs a little more coffee. That's my reminder to say, oh, I hear you, witness self. That is all true. I still have the capacity to slow out of reaction and come into response and offer a more aligned, congruent response in this interaction according to what I know serves me best in my consciousness design, which is to come from a highest vibration I can, from love. And that reaction versus response is sourced from a quotation from Viktor Frankl of between reaction and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our power. And there's more to that quotation I invite you into, but that is the kernel, the gem that I would like to invite you into here now. Compliments of Viktor Frankl, to notice that you can create that space to be as long as you need it to be to come to a place of response rather than reaction. Is it easy? Absolutely not. Is it simple? 100% yes. So you've got that on your side. And the more that we practice, life is a practice, the more that we practice and recognize there is a space that we can create in which we can exercise our power to come into alignment with our highest self available in that moment, then you'll notice that it tends to feel more energizing. Despite the fact at first, just like anything that's a new practice can be challenging, like, oh yeah, I have to really slow down into this. And just like any other new habit pattern, there's going to be a big investment of energy at the beginning, which is awesome. And that really anchors that habit pattern in and that consciousness design pattern in through two things: consistency with that habit pattern, consistency with that choice, and presence to it. How tuned in am I in that space between reaction and response to really refine the self that shows up there in that moment? And so what I invite you into is, this is about, again, consistency and presence. It's not a switch flip. And so invite yourself into be your own mirror and messenger around compassion, just as you can mirror back or be a messenger to others who are in a space of struggling with precisely what we're talking about right now. You may have heard the phrase, hurt people hurt people. And being in that space of, if we're not in our wholeness for whatever reason, that we tend to react again from those parts of self or aspects of self that are hurt or feel fractured or feel estranged from us. And so we want to bring those parts back into the fold and say, I got you. But and respond from that centered self, that aligned self, before we mirror back or we are messengers by sharing our perspective on something. And so recognizing that we can lead with compassion. Compassion is the key that fits all locks. And so being in that space of compassion, first for self, always first for self, because then as we flow inward, we can flow outward to others who may be feeling the deficit for reasons that we can't know. So, in this concept of enlightenment through connection, we've talked a bit about adopting that mirrors and messengers paradigm. We've also talked about that objective observer strategy that you can invite yourself into to create a space between reaction and response. So those are two I invite you into. How you play with those, how you make those your own. Have a good time with that. Like, it's the shower head, or it's the, I zoop out of my body and I'm looking down, floating like, Tom Cruise style in Mission Impossible. Make it fun. Make it fun. That then reinforces that feedback loop of, hey, I like this new habit pattern. I like this new consciousness design. This is fun for me. So anytime we can infuse pleasure, fun, playfulness, pleasure illuminated, it's going to stick even that much more, because we claim energy. We claim energy from these interactions or connections that have caused us friction in the past. But in our self-mastery, we extend that space between reaction and response, insert that power of choice, some self-mastery, and we go, oh, they're having a rough day. And their whatever it is hits us and slides right off, because it's not about us. It's about what's going on within them. And so again, the best, I don't love the word best there, the most useful, the most rich space to explore is within when we're making these choices. And this is where you can be the toddler. Why? Why did I respond? Why did I react? Why? Why? And oftentimes we're in that space of like, sometimes I don't want to hear that answer. Why did I respond that way? I haven't slept enough. Why did I respond that way? My back really hurts today. Why did I respond that way? I'm stressed about a work deadline. Why did I respond that way? I'm concerned about a family member. All of that is valid and important, deserves that inward gaze of compassion to say, yeah, sometimes I need to slow down, hold that energy of compassion, to raise that consciousness level, to then be in that space of, okay, that's not who I want to be today. That's not who I want to mirror to, or mirror back, have a person mirror back, all of those pieces of the puzzle. So I want to share another facet of this with each of you, is this idea of the wisdom of our bodies. So oftentimes when we're coming into connection, even these fleeting connections, we'll have a hit, an intuitive hit of our body that says, oh, no, I don't think so. It's usually closed arms, or I just need some space. Or, gosh, hi, how are you? I'm so excited to meet you. Notice the difference just in your experience of this versus this. And notice that that came from a space within you that was precognitive, and it's worthy of examination. Now, doesn't mean it's perfect information, not necessarily. We could be coming from a place of fear, not a place of love. And that sometimes is necessary to be in that space of recognizing our environment and all of those pieces of the puzzle. What I bring you back to, though, is it is a piece of information. It is data in this self-experimentation. And so my invitation to you is to cultivate your intuitive intimacy that lives in your body, to say, oh, I notice that. I notice that when I'm with this person, I want to lean out and my energy tends to get lower. Does that mean they're a bad person? No. It simply means there's not that energetic, energy first connection that may be a deep, rich connection, that may be a safe connection, that may be a useful connection, that may be a connection you even want. So it's about ordaining that wisdom and then taking it in as just simply part of the whole. I also can think about it. I can also feel my emotions about it. And I can also just energetically be aware of why my body might be responding that way. And it may have nothing to do with the person that I'm connected with, but it may. And we're often taught to just leave that behind, to just not ordain that wisdom at all. So what I offer to you is there are no clear answers there until we dig deeper into, noticing patterns, noticing what it means for us. Do I want that feeling in my body? And if I don't feel easeful with that feeling in my body, then maybe this isn't the person that I want to cultivate a deeper connection with. And we know that we have different levels of connection, investment in our connections. Ordain yourself to say, that's okay. That's okay. I'm not going to judge, but I am going to honor self by being radically honest with self and follow that wisdom to its end point, to the gem, to that kernel. And that may change from day to day. So again, back to that cultivating that inner wisdom, or that intimacy with that inner wisdom. So the greater we invest in that process of self, of getting very exploratory and experimental about why is that? That's so interesting. Then we'll have greater understanding of themes that may arise, patterns in our own habit patterns of our bodies, of our emotions in particular, that can be helpful as we move forward in cultivating those deeper connections moving forward, or choosing not to cultivate a deeper connection. And we often can cognitively override that and say, oh, but this person, fill in the blank. If there's a big but there, then it's worth checking out, why is that showing up for me? Why is that I'm in this and I'm saying yes, but okay. Instead of judging self for having that response or that reaction or response, in this case, it's a response when it's examined, and say, okay, I ordain myself to make choices according to that. And so notice then that leaves room in our life for those connections that just bring us energy, that have very little friction, or if there is friction or dissonance, we have a very clear energetic communication or cognitive communication with this person to be able to resolve that. And that energetic connection that underlies that can be um, the pathway to more easeful communication with that person. And so that is also part of the mirrors and messengers. It's not all going to be like unicorns and rainbows. It is sometimes going to be crunchy. And we listen just as deeply in those times as we do to the times where it feels very easeful. And I invite you into why, or the question, what's deeper than that? What's going on in my inner landscape? And so, with that said, in that inner landscape, we can recognize this idea of our connection energy type. Now, this isn't necessarily introvert, extrovert, ambivert, although that's a factor. Some of us are talkers, some of us are listeners, some of us, are huggers, some of us, prefer less physical connection. All of that is available to you to notice that when I am in my wholeness, when I feel most full of love for self, what is my optimal way to connect? Because when we're not having a lot of friction get in the way within ourselves, we're open to what those whom we're interacting with are offering us. If we're having a lot of inner dialogue about, I don't know if I'm not sure if I want to be here. Oh, it really makes me uncomfortable. If I don't know, I keep pushing this schedule or down the schedule. Do I really want to see this person? If that is our inner landscape while we are trying to connect with someone, then we're not able to receive. So to flow inward, to then flow outward, to be a mirror and messenger to that person. Again, no judgment, only noticing to refine and cultivate what you have available to self, to refine those connections with the humans in your midst. And we often talk a lot about lately in psychological culture, psych culture, I call it, around boundaries and requests and those kinds of things. We're not going to talk about that as strategies today, but what I offer is when we listen deeply to self and we're radically honest with what we need and want in these connections and allow people to make those choices and not personalize those, then we're in a space of really deepening into the connection that is most rich for us and therefore most rich for them. And so those boundaries allow us to have freedom in those connections. Those requests and boundaries allow us to be our most centered, loving self in those interactions. Is that, again, easy? No. Is it simple? It is quite simple when we extract judgment and we ordain that centered self to say, yeah, I am offering my highest consciousness to this person by choice, and they are doing the same. And I hope you have a lot of those kinds of connections in your life. And I hope you start to notice those connections that are bringing you a lot of information to refine that inner landscape, to come into a greater intimacy with your consciousness design and the way that you connect with the most expansive energy. That is what is my deepest desire for you as we move on from this particular Bliss Talk. So last but not least, I want to offer to each of you that in this idea of connection is that understanding that the connection to self is the foundation for it all. So I would be remiss if I didn't leave us there at the end of this Bliss Talk to say that is a fundamental facet of consciousness design as well as intimacy with self. And so these mirrors and messengers, we are that, all are that for us. And when we can be the most energetically refined for ourselves, then we know what we're offering and we can be consistent and present with these deep listening and conscious connections. So that's my deepest wish, my deepest desire is that you take this enlightenment through connection Bliss Talk and apply it into your own consciousness design choice by choice. So I want to just offer, before we stop the recording and have some chat time, you can find me on social media. I am Krista.Writes on Instagram and also on Facebook. I'm also at the Bliss Mystic on Instagram. I have a lot of fun there. I enjoy the connections there. I really embrace the raising of consciousness on social media because it often is demonized as a place of only interaction and not connection. But I find it to be a complete miracle that we can be connected with so many people by choice, applying a lot of these learnings to our own connection across time and space, across the interwebs. So please do reach out there. You can also reach me at Krista@theblissmystic.com. I welcome any reflections or any questions if you feel like those would continue to raise your consciousness moving forward regarding enlightenment through connection. So thank you for joining me for this Bliss Talk. We are now going to spend some time here together in the Zoom room. So if you're watching this recording, thank you for being here in this time machine. And I wish you all the very best. And I hope that you can join us for the next Bliss Talk and have some synchronous connection after. So please do join us synchronously next time. So thank you.